Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel for my second video, which is so exciting, which means the first video wasn't a complete car crash, and I actually got some lovely feedback on it from friends and family, and also it attracted some attention from people that I don't know, which is super exciting. So I'm back today for my second video. I'm feeling quite chilled this morning. It's a Sunday and I thought I'd film what books I got for Christmas and then talking you through a bit about my 2026 reading goals. So that's what we're going to do today. I think I'm really hard to buy books for because I do read a lot and I have a lot of books as well. I actually try to make it easier if people want to buy me a book, and that my Goodreads, my want to read, is mostly books that I don't have. So for example, I will just say to someone, here's my Goodreads, if you want to pick a book out of this category, I haven't got it. That's kind of what I did for my sister, who wanted to get me some books, and she picked 3 out of my selection. So the first is This House of Grief by Helen Garner. Before working in the bookshop, I had not heard of Helen Garner, but she won the Baillie Gifford Prize last year for, I believe, her collection of diaries, for the title which escapes me now. This is one of her most popular books, I believe, and it's a true crime book. She's writing following a trial, I believe. Let's have a little look at the blurb. Father's Day 2005, just after nightfall, a discarded husband was driving his 3 young sons back to their mother's house. On that dark country road, barely 5 minutes from home, the old white car swerved off the highway and plunged into a dam. The father freed himself and swam to the bank, but the car sank to the bottom and all the children drowned. The court case that followed became Helen Garner's obsession, one that would take over her life until its final verdict. I'm really looking forward to reading this because it sounds so interesting. It's been really popular in the bookstore as well, so excited to read this. Next, she bought me Small Hours by Bobby Palmer, and this has been on my TBR list since I knew that he was coming out with a new one, because I read, and I have it here handily, I read Isaac and the Egg in 2022 or 3, I can't remember it. I think it came out in 2022, but Ellie recommended this to me, and oh my god, it's an incredible book. I actually lent it to one of my friends recently and she loved it, and it made me think that I need to reread it this year, because it's just one of those books that stays with you. It's so unique. It's about a man, he finds a screaming egg and he has to look after it, and it sounds crazy, but I promise you, like, it's magical. It was just so clever. It really plays with like words on the page as well. It's just so good and I absolutely loved it. I weeped. It was just incredible. So I read that, and then I knew that he was coming out with a new book. This came out in 2024. I was waiting for the paperback to come out last year. I'm really happy to have this on my bookshelf. I think it's always really difficult when a debut does so well. I believe that was his debut, and you hold the first book in such high esteem and you're like, will I love that one as much as the first? But I'm really excited to give this a go. I'll just read you the blurb. There is a fox roaming around in the early hours, watching, waiting on the edge of things. He sees a family thrown together for the first time in years, a man with wild hair growing older and confused, his son lost and unconnected, a daughter denied her dreams, and a wife and mother about to leave them all. He sees the moments big and small that have divided them, the nighttime disappearances, the angry footsteps on the stairs, the silence at the dinner table. But why has the fox followed them here? And can they find their way back to each other before it's too late? So it sounds quite different from the first one, and it's quite long. It's just over 400 pages. That is very high up the TBR list for this year. Then the last book my sister bought me was Madonna in a Fur Coat by Sabahat Ali, and I think this is one of the classics that has done the rounds in the last few years with the rise of BookTok, because I hadn't heard of it before the last few years, and this actually sells really well in the bookshop as well. I'd wanted to read this for ages. It's relatively short. It's just over 160 pages, which is a really nice length for reading in one day. I love just picking up a book and flicking in and out of it all day, and I think the cover is really fun as well. This one doesn't have a blurb on the back, but I'll read you what the National said, which is the magical novel about a Turkish man who falls in love with an artist in 1920s Berlin, recreates a vanished era, and dramatizes a doomed relationship with verve, depth, and poignancy. The result is a miniature masterpiece. I love anything that's called a masterpiece. So, sounds right up my street. Really excited to give this one a go. I feel like I've said that with every book, but that's kind of why they were on my list. Next are two books that my mum bought me. My mum was a bit nervous, but she really wanted to pick me a book, and I said, go for it. Like, I will give anything a go that you buy for me. So she picked up this book, House of Splinters by Laura Purcell, and I have to admit this is not one that I would probably pick up on my own accord. I know we try to say we don't judge a book by its cover, but we all do that, especially when going out book shopping. When I read the blurb, my mum was like, I walked around the shop and I kept coming back to this one for you. So I'll just read the blurb, it's quite long. Belinda Bainbridge has spent her life in the shadows of her anxious mother, so when her father-in-law dies at the bridge, his remote ancestral seat, she is secretly thrilled. His death means she, her husband Wilfred, and their children can relocate and finally begin to build their own happy home together. Born a merchant's daughter, Belinda will now be lady of the manor, but their new home quickly proves far from ideal. The garden is a wilderness, the estate is struggling financially, there are whispers about the mysterious death of a servant many years before, and their young son Freddie seems unusually fixated on the strange wooden figures, so-called silent companions that were owned by his ancestors. When Wilfred's charismatic brother Nathan arrives unexpectedly from abroad, bringing a very different account of the family's past, Belinda begins to question what her husband has told her, what really lies behind the sad history of the house, and are Belinda's children truly safe here? Now I've read that, I'm like, that is really up my street. And that is very much what me and my mum love in stories. We love a bit of a mystery, a bit of like potential supernatural magic sprinkled in there. And that's not something I tend to read much in books. I tend to like writing that's very grounded in real life, or alternatively magical realism that is a metaphor for something. But I don't tend to read a lot of fantasy or supernatural books, so I mean I don't know if this is that, but I'm very excited to give it a go. And it is a hardback, but as you'll know from my first video, I read quite a few hardbacks at the end of last year, so I'm actually really excited to give this one a go. And it's giving me the Miniaturist vibe by Jessie Burton, and I really loved that. Thank you to my mum for picking this. I'm very much looking forward to giving this a go. The other book she picked me up was this super cute The Little Frog's Guide to Self-Care. It's just like a picture book with little affirmations on it. My body works so hard for me, and these are just so cute, and I almost want to like pull these out and put them in my journal because it feels too sad to leave them sitting in the pages of a book on my bookshelf. Just so cute. So this one says, allowing yourself to find magic in the little things is one of the sweetest ways you can interact with the world. When you look for it, you'll find it. And the frog sitting on the rainbow. That is just so cute. I'm really excited to have a proper flick through. But look at this one. Your thoughts aren't always true. Anxiety, depression, insecurities and more can influence our thoughts in many ways, and it's important to remember that just because we think it doesn't mean that it is a fact. So cute. My partner bought me Nesting by Rosin O'Donnell. I have seen this in the bookshop actually. When I saw it, I was like, this looks right up my street. This looks like something I would love. So I was very excited when I opened this on Christmas Day because, as I said, right up my street. I'll read the blurb. On a bright spring afternoon in Dublin, Kiara Fay makes a split-second decision that will change everything. Leaving home was meant to be an escape, but with dwindling savings, no job and no support network, Kiara finds herself adrift, facing a broken housing system and the voice of her own demons. As winter closes in, she must navigate raising her young children in a hotel room, searching for a new home and dealing with her husband Ryan's relentless campaign to get her to come back. Because leaving is one thing, but staying away is another. What will it take for Kiara to rebuild her life? Can she ever truly break away from Ryan's control? And what will be the cost? Tense, beautiful, and underpinned by an unassailable love, hope, and resilience, this is the story of one woman's bid to start over. Yeah, this just sounds right up my street. So very looking forward to reading this. Now, the last thing I got for Christmas, it wasn't a book, but I wanted to include it because it is very excitingly literary trivia. I got this from my partner's aunt, and we opened it and tried to do a few, and they were really hard. They are a lot about classics, and I have not read many classics. So let's pull this one out. What was the first novel written in Arabic to be awarded a Booker Prize? Answers on the postcard. Pop your answer in the comments. The answer is Joker al-Hati's Celestial Bodies. Now, I just would not know that. This will be quite fun to play to see if actually anyone can get one, because they do look quite hard. But I'm very looking forward to having a play with these and learning some more literary facts. I wanted to have a quick chat about down my 2026 reading goals, because last year I read 100 books, which is crazy, and I don't even want to say I was like rushing to hit that goal. I won't lie, on New Year's Eve I was reading quite intentionally because I did want to finish Penance before, because I thought if I finish on 99 that's just going to be so annoying. But in the lead up to that, I really had no pressure on myself. I think my initial reading goal was 80, and I thought if I surpassed that, great. I'm not working really hard to finish on a final number, because honestly, like, what is the point in that? You know, sometimes we set these arbitrary goals for ourselves, and actually if they're not helpful, you know, what is it for? Because reading is, for me, is purely for enjoyment and learning. And I definitely did that the year before last, where I think I'd set myself a reading goal of 70, and I was like a few books below that, and I was rushing over Christmas to actually hit these goals. And then it's like, what is the point? You know, books are meant to be enjoyable, and you don't want to be rushing through them to hit a goal. Last year I really took such a different approach with my reading. I had a year of like really exploring different texts and different genres and seeing what I liked and what I didn't like, and I kind of picked up anything that came in front of me. One of the things that next year I want to do is just to be a bit more curated with what I'm picking up. And I say this now I work at the bookshop, because my access to books is crazy. We get sent a lot of proof copies. I also have moved nearer a bigger library, so there's so many books that I could read, and I think I tend to get quite overwhelmed with the number of books I have to read, and I never want my TBR shelf to be longer than one entire shelf. And at the moment it's about 3/4 of my shelf, which I like, and I feel like that's really doable for the start of a year. But I don't want to overwhelm myself this year. I want to be more curated with the books that I'm picking up, and not just reading anything that falls in front of me. I want to be really thoughtful about what I'm reading. Actually, one of the things I started doing, I did in December, which worked really well for me, is that I have a general TBR shelf of books that I want to read on my physical TBR, and then I pull them onto a smaller shelf for that month, and that helps me be really focused about what I want to read in the month. It's also helpful because I'm a member of 2 book clubs, so that needs to be factored into my monthly reading, and I can actually think about the month ahead and think about, okay, how much is it realistic that I'm going to read? Is there a certain topic that relates to something that's going on in this month I want to read about? And I can actually be really thoughtful about what I'm reading, and that has been really helpful for December and January, and I think that's something I'm going to implement going forward, because I often think that when I'm reading and I'm coming to the end of a book and I'm thinking about what I'm going to read next, it can be really overwhelming to go to my big shelf and be like, okay, pick something out. Whereas if I've just got 4 or 5 books on my monthly TBR shelf, that's really helpful. And just overall being happier with reading less, so quantity over quality over quantity. I was talking about this in my podcast with my best friend Ames, and just a little shout out to That's All From Me podcast. You can stream on Apple or on Spotify. I'll link it in the description. We did a really bumper episode where we spoke about all of our top books in 2025. So if you want to find out what my top 5 books in 2025 are, you'll have to listen to the podcast. But in that podcast, we also spoke a bit about our reading goals. And I was saying that I don't necessarily feel like I have to read 100 or more books this year. I really want to prioritize quality over quantity of books. So whether that's reading longer books rather than shorter books, or just picking things that I feel like I'm going to enjoy more, rather than slogging through a book if I'm not enjoying it. And that's one of my next goals, is to DNF a bit more, because I think in previous years I've been really tentative about putting down a book because I want to give it a chance, and I'm thinking, what if I really like it in the end? And that has been the case for some books. I will admit that some books I get to about 50% and I'm like, wow, I really love this. And this happened with Intermezzo by Sally Rooney. And I was reading it and I was about halfway through, and all of a sudden it just clicked into place for me. And the last half I absolutely sped through and I loved. But the first half took me so long to get through. And that can be the case for some books. However, I want to be a bit more strict about what I'm consuming. And if I'm not enjoying it by around 50 to 100 pages, like, game over. It's time to get read. And I actually did this the other day. I was reading God of the Woods by Liz Moore. I read about 50 pages and I didn't love it. And so I decided to put it down. And I'm really umming and ahhing about giving that another go because it's getting so much love online. I think that's because Taylor Swift mentioned about reading it. I was like, no, I'm not enjoying it. I'm gonna put it down. And I'm really glad that I did, because then I picked something up that I sped through. Just being better about DNFing and not worrying too much about like, oh, you know, I might really like it, and, you know, setting these rules for myself. It's okay just to put down a book. Life is too short. And I think as I'm getting older and I'm reading more and more, I'm learning more about what I do like in a book, and I can see that earlier on. That's one of my big 2026 goals. And then very quickly, just some other things I want to prioritize. I want to do some more rereads. As I was saying with Isaac and the Egg, that's been on my reread list for so long now. I really want to reread my favorite book, which I think I'm going to make a video about, because I haven't read that for a few years now, and it's actually a bit scary to think that it might not be my favourite book after I do a reread. That's fine, because things are in flux, things are always changing, and it's fine if that's no longer my favourite book. But I really want to do some rereads. I want to read more globally as well. That is a really big thing that I spoke about in the podcast, because Amy, she does such a good job at reading lots of different stories from lots of different places, whereas I feel like I'm not so good at that. So that's something that I want to do in 2026. So those are kind of my reading goals for 2026. As I said, they're kind of loose. I don't have any big books that I want to read. I mainly just have my TBR shelf. I'm really excited for this year of reading, because I just think that I've got my reading down pat now. Like, I've got my routine. I know what I like. I read 100 books last year and I only rated 16 5 stars. So I'm hoping for a more successful year with liking books. And I think with me, like, I can like a book and I can appreciate how good it is, and that will land at a solid 4 stars, but it won't move me in the way that I want to be moved. And that's what I'm hoping for more of this year. Hope you enjoyed today's video. I will be back soon. Please do all the things, like, comment, subscribe. I hope you have a lovely week and read some good books.